It's become virtually accepted as fact that after Morrowind, Bethesda decided to streamline and simplify their storytelling to satisfy an increasingly mainstream audience who cared more about exploration than traditional roleplay, and in doing so, completely eliminated the depth and interesting narrative choices from their storytelling. Now, as you might have picked up from my tone, I never really bought this narrative. Yes, Kid in the Fridge exists, and I'm not going to try and claim that Bethesda questlines match up to the depth, size and grandeur of a game like The Witcher 3. But if Bethesda's world building and storytelling was so basic, how have they managed to generate such a passionate and engaged lore community and a player base of over 100 million people in the last 2 decades? Well, maybe because it isn't. Bethesda's storytelling undoubtedly changed, but as the more traditional role-playing elements were removed, new ones were introduced. And one quest line in my mind that conclusively illustrates this, more than any other, is Ysolda's. Ysolda's story begins in the iconic Whiterun market. After approaching her and asking basic questions, she begins to unveil her life story. We find out that she's ambitious, entrepreneurial, and desires real autonomy as an independent merchant. Most of this world riven by war and strife would be content with a simple job, a warm hearth, and a decent wage. But not Ysolda. She desires true independence.
Before my ma and Da passed, I told them that one day I'd become the best trader in Skyrim.
But with war between the Stormcloaks and Imperials bubbling under the surface, investment isn't exactly easy to find, nor gold to accrue. But a true hustler makes their own opportunity.
Work it, baby. Work it.
And as we find out, so she did. Ysolda tells us that one day she came upon a caravan of Khajiit traders who, due to the prejudice and xenophobia of the city's inhabitants, were not allowed to trade inside. But where most saw danger, she saw opportunity and promise. The Khajiit caravans might have an unsavory reputation for dubious dealings.
This one has something sweet for the fellow traveler, if it entices. The finest skooma, the sweetest moon sugar, at a fair price, of course.
In capitalism and in business, compassion is the extra mile.
But she was able to look past her prejudice and see what lay underneath. A group of highly resourceful, skilled merchants who would be perfect to trade with.
Yeah, these Khajiit make a living traveling the roads and selling their wares. It's got to be tough. Skyrim's a hard enough land when you've got a roof over your head. Worst thing is, nobody wants them in the cities. Nobody trusts them.
So she made a trade proposal to the chief.
I met one of the caravan leaders, Madran. He said he'd help me get started if I could bring him a mammoth's tusk. Easier said than done.
And this is where we come in. For a maiden like Ysolda with neither money nor the strength to best a mammoth, this will be an impossible task. But for a dragonborn, well, that's a completely different story. And so, like the modern day man assembling a wardrobe, we take up this task to prove our worth as a man. However it's acquired, after we hand the task back to Ysolda, she thanks us, and the quest ends. And for most people, so will her story. But the genius of this storyline, and much of Bethesda's storytelling post-Morrowind, is that for the chosen few obsessed with exploring every inch of the game, there's always a far more interesting story to be uncovered. One that, in the case of this story, will completely shift our perspective so much that a simplistic fetch quest will seem like a genius bait and switch in retrospect. You see, in a fairly inconspicuous spot any player can come across during their exploration, the Sleeping Tree Cave, there lies a dark secret about our merchant maiden, just waiting to be uncovered by an entrepreneurial explorer, Ysolda's note. At the end of the cave, on the body of a random NPC named Ulag, we find a note written by Ysolda to him that reads as follows. Don't try to stiff me on this deal, Ulag. I can talk the Khajiit caravans into a better price than you'd be able to, and the guards are still looking for you after that little skooma incident. Just bring the sap to my stall in Whiterun like we discussed. If you haven't realized yet, this note reveals that ambitious, sweet Ysolda is in fact more of a Griselda, a ruthless dealer of sleeping sap, a powerful hallucinogenic that's a mix between alcohol and acid. On its own, it's a stunning revelation, but the real genius of this note is that it forces us to completely reevaluate our understanding of the first quest and our interactions with Ysolda. You see, now it becomes clear that everything she told us at the beginning was for the purpose of manipulation. She implied that unlike many others, she was able to look past her prejudices to work with the Khajiits just to exploit our sympathy. And when sympathy was not an option, in the case of Ulag, she was more than willing to use his other vulnerabilities to get her way. It gets better. You see, after returning to Sleepy Whiterun to confront her, Ysolda doesn't respond in shame, break out in tears, or try to deny the reality. After an unconvincingly brief show of grief,
Did you? So Ulag didn't make it past those giants then? More's the pity.
she immediately shifts gears and tries to use this revelation to get us in on her hustle as her new connect.
If you found any of the sap, I'd be willing to pay you the same cut I offered him. Better price than you're likely to find otherwise.
All business. And if we want to, we can. So in the end, a fairly basic quest line from a largely irrelevant character has somehow turned into a portrait of a psychopath. A woman who has no shame and will do anything in her pursuit of wealth and opportunity, who successfully manipulated us to do her dirty work in the past and potentially the future.
All I know is that the sap makes you feel as healthy as a cave troll, but slow as a drunk horker. And that it fetches good coin.
Not only is this excellent storytelling, that despite what the critics of Skyrim or most post-Morrowind Bethesda games harp on about constantly, role-playing is at the core of this quest. There are no markers to find Ulag. The only thing drawing a player there would be their initiative and desire to explore. In other words, role-playing. And Ysolda's quest isn't alone. Bethesda games are rife with stories that utilize a uniquely interactive, environmental storytelling to add flavor to their narratives, and I believe they deserve more recognition for this. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.